How's it going? This is Hoiman, and today we're taking a look at the S.H.Figuarts Cure Flora figure. So this is pretty much where the Precure figure line starts going downhill a bit, and what I mean by that is the sales start to go down, and that's why going forward now all of these Precure figures are web exclusives, so they're much more limited and they're much more pricey as well. But saying that, this figure at least still has a window to see the figure inside. So you can see her with all her accessories. And on the top we have pictures for the figure, same for both the sides. Legal stuff for the bottom. And then you have various pictures on the back. And then to open the box, just lift open the side flap. And then just lift open the front cover. And there's the figure all together with her accessories. So first you do get some instructions showing what the figure comes with and how to operate the accessories. So here's the actual figure itself, and I do actually have a major gripe with this figure, and that's pretty much for all the Precure figures going forward. They all share a common gripe, but I'll get to that in a bit. But for now, the sculpt on this figure is really nice, and this is pretty much the time where the entire Figuarts line started really improving its quality. And that means it went for the same for the Precure figures. So I feel that the sculpt and the paintwork on this figure is just a really big improvement over the older figures. There's a lot more paintwork, a lot more shading, and just much more complex sort of sculpt. So taking a close look at the face, I feel that it captured the likeness of the character really well. And then you have her hair, which is a nice matte yellow finish, but then you have the pink parts on top for the strands. And then there's even some darker shades in the folds and even some lighter tints as well. And the tips end up with like a pearly pink colour, so it looks really nice overall. A lot more detail in the hair than compared to the older figures. And then you have a crown here as well, which is a nice metallic gold paint with the glossy flower. Moving down to her outfit, again just really nicely sculpted. All the buttons are nicely painted with a gold paint. Then you have the ribbon, which has some shading. And then you have the massive bow on the front with the gold paint at the button as well. And then the skirt itself is really nicely sculpted. And you can see all the darker shades and lighter tints in the folds. And overall, it just looks really well detailed and really well sculpted. The paintwork is a bit rough on some of the edges, particularly on the white. But for the most part, I think it's pretty clean. And then of course you have a ribbon on the back as well. And unlike the older Precure figures where the skirt is usually made from soft material, Cure Flora's skirt is entirely solid, so you have to be careful in case you break them. But because it's really solid, it shouldn't break too easily, but still you just have to be careful. And then going down to her shoes, again nicely sculpted and detailed. And then they are solid as well for the ribbons, so you have to be careful of them. So before I get to the articulation, I just want to go over a major gripe with this figure. And like I said, this is a major issue with all the Precure figures going forward, and that is the wrist joint. And unfortunately on mine, I did accidentally break her wrist joint. And that's mainly because, if I can show you, just have to be really careful taking the hand off. So now that I've got the hand off, you can see how thin just the wrist joint is. It's super thin. And because it's so thin and it has a hinge as well, it's really easily can break. And I'm usually really gentle when I handle these figures, but even that wasn't enough. And I wasn't even doing anything drastic. I was just literally just trying to swap her hand off to change with the other hands, you know, like how these figures usually like to function. And then the hand just broke off. Like the wrist joints are just so weak on this figure, which is really odd because with the older Precure figures, none of them really have an issue just because the wrist joints are much more thicker and much more sturdy in my opinion. And with these newer figures in the line, the wrist joints are just so thin that even just performing the usual function of swapping out hands, they can break on you. So I just have to inform you that if you do plan on getting this figure, just be extra careful of the wrist joints, because I just kind of feel that it isn't entirely my fault. Like, I know I accidentally broke it, but all I try to do is just swap out a hand, but even then the wrist joint just isn't sturdy enough to perform that function. So I do feel that it is a bit of a QC issue with these figures, but like I said, if you do get this figure, just be really careful with the wrist joints because they're just so thin. And then the second gripe I have with the figure is, it's not really something new, but some Precure figures do have it, and that is that the head does easily come off. And it does get quite annoying while I'm posing, like the head just likes to fall off and just isn't really that tightly held on. So it is a minor gripe, but even with the improvements in the figure, there are still some QC issues with this figure, so just keep that in mind. But for articulation, the neck is on a single ball joint, so she can look down that much, look up that much, can tilt her head side to side as well as twist. And then with this figure, her hair is actually solid, but it isn't super heavy, so it doesn't really weigh down her head too much. But the top of the head is on a hinge, so you can swivel her hair about however you like. And then the shoulder, it's on a ball joint with the torso, so you can move her arm about however you like. And it's also on a hinge, so you can bring her arm out to the side. And this piece is a solid piece, but it doesn't really get in the way of articulation. You can bring her arm forward, bring her arm back. She has the bicep swivel, and then she has a single jointed elbow, and then she has the really thin ball jointed wrist. And then for the torso, it's on a single ball joint, so she can lean forward about that much, lean back that much, not really a whole lot, lean side to side as well as twist, like so. And then for the hips, they are on a ball joint, so you can move her legs about however you want. You can twist them, and then each leg is on a ball joint. So like I mentioned, with the whole skirt, it's all really solid, so she is quite restricted in her legs, but she can still kick about that far to the side, kick forward that much, kick back that much. She has the thigh swivel, and then she has single jointed knees, and then she has the ball jointed ankle, so you can go back that much, forward that much, lean side to side as well as twist. So for the most part, she has all the articulation you'd expect a Figuarts figure to have, but she does have some restrictions such as the head and then the legs, but other than that, you should still be able to get all the poses you'd want. But that's the figure. Let's take a look at the accessories. So for faces, she comes with a default smiling face, a happy smiling face, a talking face, and an angry shouting face. For hands, she comes with a pair of open palmed hands, and then a rack of various hands. So you have 2 chopping, 2 fists, 2 hands hold her weapons, 2 more fists, 2 posing styled hands, and then 1 hand to hold her perfume. She also comes with an extra neck joint to hold up her hair just in case. She comes with a perfume bottle, which is really nicely sculpted and detailed. Nice use of the translucent for the front and then this top can be removed as well. She also comes with a main weapon, again nicely sculpted and detailed. Nice use of the translucent again, and then the top can be removed. She also comes with a fairy, nicely sculpted and detailed. And then her head is on a ball joint, so you can move her about however you want. And then finally she comes with a display base, which I do recommend using with this figure. So my final thoughts are, overall this is a nice looking figure. It's really nicely sculpted and detailed. Paintwork is very nice and clean for the most part, and it's just a really nice representation of the character. But I will say, like I mentioned at the start, this is pretty much where the Precure line started going downhill in terms of sales, and that's why even the main characters such as Cure Flora is now web exclusive, so that pretty much makes all Precure figures going forward now extra expensive. And because these are the newer lines of figures with more complex sculpts and articulation, the price has risen up quite dramatically as well. So these are really expensive figures now, and they do go up in price in the aftermarket as well. And despite that, they still have some QC issues, such as the loose neck joint and then the super thin wrist joints, which I feel that they really need to deal with for the future figures. But again, if you're a fan of this character or the show, then I can still recommend this figure, but just be really mindful of this figure's wrist joints, because they are just not stable and are really easily to break. And as for the line going downhill, it is a shame. Like, with a series as big as Precure, even that series isn't really selling too well in terms of merchandise for the Figuarts line. So it is a shame seeing that this line isn't selling that well, and these figures aren't releasing as fast as they did back in the day. And because of the higher price point, and also with QC issues, it does kind of detract from the figure a bit, and may detract from buyers a bit as well. But again, if you are a fan of this character, then I'm sure you won't be disappointed with this figure. But just keep in mind with the wrist joints. But that's my review. Thank you for watching, and enjoy some pictures.